that we are the voices.
Hey, what's going on, y'all? This is Neil Volz with the Our Voice podcast. Welcome to another great conversation we're getting ready to have focused on our lives, the lives of people who have been impacted by the criminal legal system. You know, we like to say that, man, there's a lot of good shows out there. There's a lot of good places to go to get information, to get entertainment, to kind of learn more. But if you really want to learn about the movement around criminal justice reform, you really want to learn about kind of the challenges that are facing people who have been impacted by the criminal legal system, you got to come out here and hang out with us at the Our Voice podcast, because this is our lives. This is our experiences, and this is the things that we're bringing to life in our conversation. So welcome, welcome, welcome. I do have some news. Desmond is not with us today. So he sends his regards. He says, what's up? He's excited to hear this conversation, and I am super excited to get jumping into a conversation with two amazing leaders, two folks who really know their stuff when it comes to second chance employment, when it comes to reentry, when it comes to how the economy works, and all those things that are really important to the real lives of people, who are watching and listening tonight. And I just want to kind of hype this up because Brandon, as you know, Brandon likes to script us up. We never follow it. But we might follow it a little bit today, but he's got the hype board here. And I don't even know that I'm smart enough to like hype these guys up in a way that does them do justice. But I do want to introduce, we're going to start off with John Koufos, who's a friend. He's been a part of the CJ movement for a long time. He's formerly incarcerated. Man, he is a great, great guy. But when I look at what's in front of me, I didn't even know. I was like, man, he has got a BA and an MA from John Jay College. He's got an MBA from Johns Hopkins University. He's got a JD from Fordham University. I don't know that, John, you've been doing anything but going to school, man. I don't know how you got all these reforms implemented, all this cool stuff you're doing. But John's an executive level nonprofit leader, a private sector manager who helps companies optimize second chance hiring and mitigate risk. Super timely, man. Like we all know, we are in a spot right now where second chance employment is right at the heart of our national conversations, our conversations here at the state. John has worked to help thousands of people with criminal records secure jobs. He's worked with multiple presidential administrations, dozens of governors and cabinet members, and countless businesses and nonprofits. He recently served as the executive director of Safe Streets and Second Chances, and previously served as an executive director of the New Jersey Reentry Corporation. John was certified as a criminal trial attorney by the New Jersey Supreme Court and has lived experience in the New Jersey State prison system after a successful career as a criminal defense and civil rights lawyer. What's up, John? Welcome to the Our Voice podcast, man. How you doing?
Wonderful to be with you, Neil. I love being with you every time, and I'm looking forward to coming to see you. Hopefully next week. I hope to swing by when I'm in Orlando.
I love it. I've seen that you've been all over Florida. You've been talking second chance and fair chance employment with people, and talking to businesses and universities, and really look forward to digging into that. I'm wondering, can we like center this conversation? Because I as I'm reading all the accolades, man, and how wonderful, man. You're just showing those of us who have been through this system, what's possible when you put your nose to the grindstone and work and do everything that you can to keep moving forward. So I applaud all the work that you're doing. But I was wondering, could you like take us back a little bit? Like, what was it like growing up? What was it, like being a young John Koufos, man? And get us to this place where you are right now, if you could.
Sure. So, growing up was wild. So my first time ever in Florida, you'll appreciate this. My father was on the run from the FBI and the ATF. So that was my first experience in Florida as a kid. My dad had escaped federal custody and went on the run and dragged us around with him for some period of time during that whole thing. We lived in Florida actually for a period of time under an assumed name out in Daytona Beach and Fort Lauderdale. So growing up was a wild time. When I get returned back up north, I'm from New Jersey. Well, born in New England and raised in New Jersey and New York. When we get back to the New York, New Jersey area, my mom and I, dirt poor, right? We had nothing. So we moved to Ocean County, New Jersey, which your listeners probably know from the Jersey Shore. I grew up right near there, actually. Wow. And in my wilder days, I went to all those same bars as well. And thankfully, no one was recording anything back then because I'm sure I embarrassed myself more than I normally embarrass myself. So start, I go to high school down there. Start drinking at 15. Very abusive house, very abusive life, abusive household. Lot of every type of abuse other than sexual abuse that you could imagine. So I start drinking at 15, and I just happen to be, one of those functional alcoholics. So I get myself into college. I do well there. I get myself a half ride to law school. I do well there, and then my legal career, took off from that point. But growing up was, when they say that, interestingly enough, when they say that children of incarcerated parents often become incarcerated themselves, I never thought of it in the fashion that I would go to prison, right? But addiction touches everybody. Fortunately, I've been, in recovery for, over a decade now. But, my father's profession, candidly, was crime. I don't know that I could have built a reentry program for my dad. That just wasn't what he did for a living. He was the very small percentage of outliers. But interestingly enough, the ripple effect of that whole experience contributed to my own incarceration, right? With addiction-based crime. And as you know, Neil and Jeff, as we're all dear friends, but your viewers might know, I had a very successful law career, tried cases, everything from municipal court to murder, civil rights cases, organized crime cases. But in 2011, summer of 2011, I was driving drunk, because I always drove drunk at that point in my life, hit somebody, almost killed them. Tried to lie my way out of it for a few days. So I went and turned myself in. I came off that bender, and thank the good Lord that person lived and recovered. Nothing I did to contribute to that. And, Lord gave me that option. Lord gave me options and gave me that blessing to not have a body on my conscience. And I've tried to make the most of my career and experiences ever since.
Yeah. So when I hear your story, right, it seems like if I didn't know it, right, like it was going to go right into this space where it's kind of like, oh, I was growing up and then I ended up in the system. But as you just said, you had a successful legal practice, right? So you were actually, kind of trying cases, working with clients and doing all that as an adult, right, for a while, and had that experience before ending up being incarcerated, right?
That's right. And, I went to prison from a courtroom where I started my law career, actually, in Ocean County, New Jersey. I tried cases in that courtroom, had some of the best moments of my life in that court, and walked out of that courtroom in cuffs. And
dude, what was that like? Right? I mean,
surreal. There were two big surreal legal cases. That one right there, and the last case I ever did, which is actually in Jeff's book, Untapped Talent. He talks about it. One of the actually pretty much the last case I ever did. I'm out on $150,000 bail. I'm under indictment, but I had a case before the New Jersey Supreme Court, biggest search and seizure case of the year, State versus Sharif Edmonds, community caretaking, emergency aid doctrine, big case. My client says to me, like, I don't care that you're under indictment. You've won this case at the trial and appellate levels. I'd like you to be here. And I said, well, it's not Sharif's fault that I'm my New Jersey almost came out, that I'm a screw up. It's not Sharif's fault that I'm a screw up. I got to kick up for him. So I went and I argued the case before the New Jersey Supreme Court while out on $150,000 bail. Only lawyer in the history of New Jersey to do that. Flash forward, I end up when I go to prison from the courtroom where I tried all those cases, I end up getting a decision in prison and I won. So I felt really, I felt vindicated in that right.
You found out while you were in prison.
That we won, yeah. Ooh. So I won. Sharif, we still suppressed the evidence that was illegally obtained from Sharif. So, for the type of clients I dealt with, and I dealt with, serious cases, you have this feeling as a lawyer, especially when you're a lawyer coming from an incarcerated parent, right, and a family of people who've been locked up, that you know everything about the system. But listen, when that door closes, I don't care how much you think you know, when that door closes behind you that day, you don't know, you realize you don't know anything. And that education gave me insight that I would later on use. So they sent me to a place called Bayside State Prison in New Jersey, which was a prison my clients were afraid of. So that should tell you something where they sent me. I was sentenced to 6 years in prison. I expected to pull 44, 45 months off of that with good time, because in New Jersey, we have good time. In Florida, it's a truth in sentencing state, so you don't have it. Or no meaningful good time there. So anyway, Bayside, I saw the very worst in people. both officers and inmates, but I also saw the very best in people, both officer and inmates. And I'll never forget, just watching, the racial makeup of the prison, watching the educational makeup of the prison, and having people come to me, not asking me for money. That was, even they all knew who I was, and which was good because I was going bankrupt, but they didn't know that. Right. But always asking me for a job. People did not ask me for money, Neil. They asked me for work to help them get a job. And they tell you, this because you've been locked up. Jeff, you work in the field, but for folks that don't work in the field, the overwhelming majority, I'm talking like 85% of the people I saw, they come up to me, John, I want to reunify with my family. I want to work. I want to earn my dignity back. I don't want to come back here. They just don't know. They don't know how to navigate the space. There's a million administrative barriers. So I end up getting paroled, shockingly, because here's a Jersey story. I didn't know. President Obama came to my program in New Jersey. Wow. President Trump, I was on stage with him before, worked with probably half the governors of this country. I never knew a single politician until I was a felon, right? Until I had a criminal record. Now, maybe that's a normal story in New Jersey, that you got to have a criminal record to know any politicians. And probably Chicago, where Jeff's from. But in general, I didn't know any. So here I am, a high-profile inmate, going up before the parole board, figure they're going to hit me, deny parole. They end up letting me out and partnering me with the treatment I needed. Had nowhere to go, though, because I didn't have a house anymore. Moved in with a law school roommate in Hoboken, New Jersey. Great town. I know a guy got married there one day, a great guy named Korzenik. He's got his Jersey roots. And but Hoboken, Neil, if you don't know, Hoboken is not where a drunk goes to get sober. Hoboken is a party town. Always has been, always will be. But luckily, I had a great recovery network. Had a chance meeting with a former governor of New Jersey, Jim McGreevey, who had a vision to build reentry centers around New Jersey. I had a vision to clear up old driver's license, fines, fees, debts, get people to work. We partnered together. We formed the New Jersey Reentry Corporation with the help of Chris Christie, who was our governor at the time. Put every former living governor on the board and built 10 sites in 8 counties. Served tens of thousands of people, got thousands of IDs, restored hundreds of driver's licenses, and got people living wage jobs. And that was the key. Not just a job, but a living wage job, a career.
Well, I'm looking forward to getting Jeff into this conversation, but let me just follow up real quick because, it's fascinating to see those connection points. And for people who are watching and listening to us, man, if there's somebody in this country who's got questions about reentry, about second chance employment, they want to talk to John, right? So John, you lead, man, and I'd love to dig in a little bit further, but I'm curious, how did your experience inform you about the reentry system? Or how was it that you found yourself in a spot where right away you could work with the governor and you could set up this reentry corporation and you could start to see, right, the things that you just outlined, driver's licenses, the importance of, a job with a good wage and family reunification. Some of those things take a little bit of time for people to walk through, but it sounds like there was some process that clicked with you as it related to reentry that set you up for success. What was your reentry process like, in addition to the things that you shared, right, about your friend and having a place to crash because you knew somebody, but you didn't have housing, right, which is a real challenge for people.
The catalyzing event, I owe the trajectory of my reentry career to an inmate paralegal at Bayside State Prison. There was an inmate paralegal sitting there, and I went to the Bayside State Prison Law Library. I helped people out when they needed help with legal work, don't get me wrong. But I went there because it was one of the 3 air-conditioned spots in the whole prison. And I was reading my New York Times, and I see this inmate paralegal. He's got canteen stacked feet high, and he's writing these motions. And I said, "What are you writing?" And he goes, "Well, listen, man, in New Jersey, they suspend your driver's license for everything, and they do that everywhere in the country. And when they suspend your driver's license, it creates new fines, fees, warrants." He goes, "So I help people clear those up, and they pay me in soups and things like that." And I said, "I've been watching guys go out to parole, get sent right back on returns." I said, "Somebody's got to fix this. This is insane." So when I saw that was the first day I thought I could help one day. but didn't know I was going to do that. When I got out, although I had no place to live, I was lucky enough to have a job waiting for me at a company. Actually, it was a biometric security company of all places, right? And I was on parole. But I knew the CEO, so he gave me a job, and I helped him in the front office. So that's all I wanted to do. I knew I had all these lawyer buddies. I could clear up driver's licenses. I knew driver's licenses led to jobs, right? I knew it. I knew that much. And I knew what it was like to be an addict. And I knew what it was like to be raised in with a certain level of abuse. So I had enough. I knew enough about enough, but I knew the exact process to untangle the legal barriers. So I called my old buddies at the bar association when I get out on parole. They're my old drinking buddies, but I don't drink now, so we got to find something to do together. I said, listen, let's go restore some driver's licenses, and we'll put together. We actually built the largest one in the country to restore driver's licenses. The way I got connected to anyone in politics is just straight up hustle. And I say that it was hustle, it would start it, and it was luck. So I emailed the mayor of Jersey City because I saw he had a reentry program, a guy named Steve Fulop. But being a lawyer, I didn't email him at Jersey City. I found his Gmail, right? I found buried in a document. I emailed him his personal address because, you got to know where to look. Never expected to hear anything back and said, hey, this is what I saw about driver's licenses. God bless the guy. He responds copying former Governor Jim McGreevey, who he was partnered with to do some reentry ministry work. That's how I got the meeting with former Governor McGreevey, who had this brilliant vision, but just hadn't had enough people around to execute it yet. Now he's doing, fantastic work, of course. Well, he always has been, but now he's like, taking it in overdrive.
But because what I love about your story and your leadership, man, because then it's like, I see it here, right? The Earn Your Way Out Act, the Fair Release and Reentry Act. I mean, you're talking about making substantive policy changes by working with elected officials. And I do want to say to anybody who's watching and listening to us, listen to John's hustle, man, hustling works, right? So I appreciate the way you did that. But can you tell it, it says here, the Fair Release and Reentry Act required the Corrections Department to provide essential items, valid photo ID needed by folks upon release from prison, right? It seems straightforward, and it can be really hard to navigate. Right. So it sounds like you made the right connections, right? Got connected with the former governor. How were you able to kind of then build that bridge to suddenly seeing policy change happen?
So the thing was this, is that we knew there needed to be direct services, but there were so many systemic barriers. So that during that time in the prison system, the prison would tell you that if you asked the Department of Corrections if they got people ID, they would just say yes, but they didn't. Right. They got your ID if you had all of your ID except the actual license. Right. And then they might get you one. So as I would tell those experiences to the board of directors of the New Jersey Reentry Corporation, which was every living governor of New Jersey. Right. And Governor McGreevey took such an interest in talking to the cabinet in New Jersey. We were able to get the meetings we needed. And I said, listen, we need a law to mandate this, right? And this is why. I'm telling you, this is what I saw every day there. And I was just one of many credible voices, but because I was able probably to articulate it in a fashion that legislators, could listen to and could understand, their staffs could understand, I think we were very successful. But, much of the credit to get me that platform really falls on former Governor McGreevey, Governor Christie, and the former governors in New Jersey. They were able to cut a lot of the red tape so we can have those conversations. Earn Your Way Out was, so basically Fair Release and Reentry was supposed to just get your basic documents, get discharge programming, etc., to try to get you back to zero, right? Because when you come out of prison, you're way in the negatives. So what Earn Your Way Out was essentially earn time credit off your parole terms. If you're on parole and you're compliant, you should be able to earn time off of that, thus allowing the parole office to focus on people who are not compliant and need really intense supervision, right? But if you're doing your thing, right, there should be some mechanism to cut that early. And of course, then it opens you up for many more employment possibilities.
Right on, right on. Well, speaking of employment policies and opportunities, we've got some untapped talent sitting on the other side of this, microphone here that we need to bring into the conversation. I'm trying to stay on message, Jeff. It's, I need to do the self-hype machine here too. Y'all are impressive, man. I'm nervous talking to you, but let me tell you guys.
Who am I to interrupt? You go for it, Neil. Thank you.
I like it. You're like, no, No. Go ahead. You hype me up, man. So Jeff is the chief investment strategist for one of the nation's largest banks, right? Where he is responsible for the investment strategy and allocation of $40 billion in assets. So y'all think about that. Our guest here it works in the financial services sector at a really high level. He has more than 30 years of experience in the investment management industry. Jeff is a regular guest on CNBC, Fox Business News, Bloomberg TV for his insights into the economy, markets, manufacturing, and the workforce. And he's frequently cited in a variety of financial and business press. He also has wrote a book, which I am in the middle of reading. I started, I think, with chapter 6. I got my direction in terms of where to start. But Jeff is the author of Untapped Talent: How the SecondChance hiring works, hold it up. I love it. Untapped Talent: How SecondChance hiring works for your business and the community. It's a groundbreaking book on the business case and best practices for hiring people with criminal records. Let me introduce Jeff Korzenik. Welcome to the Our Voice podcast, man. Thank you so much for taking the time. I know you've been really out there hustling.
Thank you, Neil. Great to be here. And, one thing you left out, I'm John Koufos' straight man. So it's a hard lift, but I manage.
Wow. I would have put that one right at the top of that list. To be John's straight man, that's tough, man. Yeah. So how did you, right? I sit there and when I think, and man, I immense respect. I'm so grateful for your voice in all of this work. And if I could kind of tee it up for the conversation a little bit with some of the folks who are watching and listening, what I really appreciate about you, Jeff, is you make the business case for second chance employment. I know as a human being, you probably think there's a morality story here. You think there's ethical reasons. You think there's all these kind of things to embrace second chances in this. But actually, you spend your time talking to businesses and making the case that this is good business to engage in second chance employment, fair chance hiring, all that. Can you tell us how you got involved in this movement?
I think I stumbled into this in a lot of ways. Back around 2013, I started hearing a lot from employers that they couldn't find people who could pass a drug test. And at the same time, there's an active discussion among those of us who follow the financial markets and the economy, but how many people were missing from the workforce? And I started to put two and two together, and I realized that the opioid epidemic in particular was more than just a social ill. It was of a magnitude that made it an economic problem. If you're holding people out of the workforce at the individual level, obviously there's a personal tragedy, but at the national economic level, we're holding back our growth potential as an economy. And once your eyes are opened to the way that social ills can actually be of a size that they're economic problems, suddenly, it's a pretty easy leap from going from economic problems associated with the opioid epidemic to economic problems associated with justice impact. And at the same time, I in 2015, I quite frankly stumbled into some second chance employers who did it really well. And I thought, this is something I've got to share. For the good of the customers of the bank. The businesses we bank need to know about this, because at the time I saw the labor shortage coming, and the numbers just laid that out very clearly. So I started collecting these employers and finding them, searching for them around the country, getting introductions to them. No one in the academic world had studied them at the time, and I found out they all had the same approach. So there was a model of success, and that's why I talk about the business case, because it's there, and because you can talk till you're blue in the case about the moral case, but it's not going to work unless it's profitable for businesses to hire people with records, give them living wage employment, and do it in a way that works for the business. If for no other reason, we could never scale this hiring up to meet the needs of our society if it doesn't work on a case-by-case basis.
Wow. I mean, that is powerful. So it's interesting. So I think about what I understand to be your kind of day-to-day, right? Where you have large clients that you're advising or you're talking to as an economist, as a financial manager, and you're advising these companies, on how to make wise investments and what moves to make it. 2013, 14, 15, right? Like, you're starting to see these patterns in the economy in which businesses are being hurt because of the, opioid situation or a variety of other things that are actually keeping people out of the labor market. And man, that's just fascinating to me that like you're coming at it really from the perspective of I'm advising businesses on how to do their thing, which is, grow their business, make money, create jobs. And suddenly this whole second chance piece of it just comes flying into your screen, right?
Yeah. This labor shortage was coming. We stopped having enough babies in this country 20 and 30 years ago to replace the people who retire. The pandemic made what was supposed to be a gradual labor shortage into a very sudden labor shortage. But the solution is if you stopped having enough babies 20 and 30 years ago, the business solution has to be let's dive into our population and make sure we're not overlooking people who can contribute to the economy. And the reason I focus on this is because it is the biggest pool that I can think of that is so overlooked. And you have to couple that. It's not just enough that there's a broad and deep pool of talent. It's that there are models that businesses can adopt that allow them to identify who's ready for employment and then establish the processes that allow those employees to thrive and contribute to that business enterprise.
Well, let me ask you about that. So you've seen the models, you see kind of how this works in the marketplace. It seems like there's a missing link almost in some cases between businesses who are jumping into it and some businesses who might be a little apprehensive. What do you make of that? Is that kind of a natural apprehension, or are there different marketplaces that might be more advantageous to engage in second chance employment, or what are your thoughts?
There's really two things you have to consider. Number one is, and I think sometimes my friends in the justice reform community forget how many businesses have at some point or along the way tried it and not had success. And because there is a pathway to success, and there's a number of pathways that it won't work, or it won't produce the kind of value-added employees that I talk about in the models. So a lot of reformers highlight the success cases and the models of success. We also have to be careful and say, but that's because these businesses did it right. You want the happy outcome, you have to make an investment in the process. So there is this negative experience. And so I have to, as I'm out there talking to businesses, I'm very careful to say, you as a business person may have had a different experience. Here I talk about these studies, and we all have experience with people who are ready to turn their life around. Boy, they will walk through walls to prove they're more than their worst mistake. That's the win, right? From a business perspective, you get a highly engaged and loyal employee. But I have to go out to the business community and say, this may not have been your experience, and here's why. Here's where you had the wrong process. The problem was your process, not this population of our fellow citizens. But then, of course, there's those who, even though they've had no experience, have a high degree of fear that they will be undermining their business through creating a dangerous workplace, or undermining their business because there is this belief that somehow second chance means second rate. And it's really important to address all of those and surface those. So my ideal interaction with business owners is not my standing up and giving a presentation. It's my, as I did in Atlanta last night, sitting around with business leaders and saying, let's talk about it. What's on your mind? What do you fear? And let's go through the objections, because you have to surface them and address them and face them. And it's fear of something going wrong, fear of the associated negligent hiring liability that might be come with that, fear of quality, fear of reputation. Those are the big three objections. You can address all of them, but the only way you can address them is bringing it to the surface.
Wow. Right, because it sounds like you get pretty deep then in these conversations, because it does seem like it's almost the business community culture, or that there's the community of business leaders that you're spending time talking about, in which businesses are taking steps for their business sake, right? It's like, I need to learn how to change my HR system. How do we assimilate people into, the workforce who might be on probation, or might be, like some of those things, it might seem, at least my life experience is that sure, you could put it on the whiteboard and kind of talk through those things, and it seems like one thing until you're the person on probation and your new boss just called you about it and you're like, you know what, I'm out of here. And suddenly the system now looks bad, for all parties. And yet it's such a human experience at the core.
Yeah. And, one of the things that business leaders have to be prepared for is a lot of pushback. And so they have to be well armed. I early on in the process, I make my case for this, and I found out later businesses would get, CEOs would be hyped up. They'd go back to their place of business and say, hey, let's try this. And suddenly the chief human resources officer said, oh, no, we can't do that. The chief legal officer would say, oh, no, we can't do that. And without having the knowledge and the facts to push back, many a CEO, they've got other things to do. They've got a lot on their plate. And to drive an initiative like this really requires a very conscious act and the knowledge on how you can drive this. And that's, that was frankly a big motivation for writing the book.
Wow. Man, that's powerful. John, can I bring you back? And you just wrote an op-ed, I think it was Governing Magazine or Governing the website. And I think two things can be true. I think you were trying to make a point here in which you're basically saying like, hey, we don't just have a straight up labor shortage. We actually have a shortage of second chance employment. Can you kind of outline how that fits into kind of what Jeff was just describing to us?
Sure. And, I got a lot of the motivation for that article and a lot of the things I've written actually from Jeff and from Untapped Talent. For those people that might be new to the movement or might not know, I mean, I'm not exaggerating. What Jeff Korzenik has done, especially through his book, but what Jeff Korzenik has done has literally redefined the way the nation looks at second chance hiring. There's absolutely no question about it, because Jeff's credibility and his knowledge to be able to speak directly to businesses was that missing link, right? I was able to accomplish some of it because I get in a lot of rooms with general counsels, chief legal officers, right? But at the end of the day, Jeff's a guy who spent his whole life making businesses money, right? So they listen to him. So as I've learned from Jeff through our friendship and obviously from reading Untapped Talent, I started to think about it that, yes, we have this labor shortage, or let me go back. We have this unfilled job shortage, but we only have a labor shortage because, as Jeff pointed out, the biggest pool out there that he could think of were people with criminal records that were overlooked. And what we have is this second chance hiring shortage. There's a number of reasons for it. There's the reasons Jeff outlined, of course, the cultural reasons behind it, the fear, the negligent liability piece. I spend a lot of time, putting people to sleep, talking about legal principles of negligent hiring, right? And all kinds of legalese. But those are all very real issues. There's also the issues how every state is different, right? Some occupational licensing in one state's different than another. There's virtually no expungement in Florida, with very limited expungement. New Jersey has vast expungement. There's all of these different factors that go into it. So what I wanted to do, because Governing Magazine, is the policymaker's Bible, right? So that's why I wanted to publish it there. So the governors, legislators, speakers of the House, Senate presidents at the state level could see, listen, they're here. Because this issue, when we talk about the gap in prosperity, the gap in wealth, the increasing divides along racial and economic lines in this country, really, this is the civil rights issue of our time right here, right now. The three of us and so many other powerful speakers and minds are in it. But this is the pathway to equity and pathway to equality is for so many citizens in this country. The work that we do, meaning not just the three of us, that we do in the movement, the work that's done changes the trajectory of people's lives and their families' lives in ways we will never know. Right? But we make our communities better, stronger, more prosperous, and safer, all through second chance hiring. And that's why it was really important to me when I could choose where I wanted to place this article, to place it in Governing Magazine. And I really wanted to make sure we stop thinking that there's no workers out there. There's plenty of workers out there. You just need to go look for them.
No, that's exact. And one of the things I love that you touched on is, I think about my story of trying to learn to live with that felony conviction. Getting the job was hard, right? And then I got my minimum wage job. I'm working as a janitor. I'm doing my thing. I'm taking my second chance seriously. I'm trying to live a better life. And then realizing that the rungs up, right, at least in this state in particular, are haphazard at best. I live down in Southwest Florida, lots of water. I'm like, oh, I'd love to be working on these boats. Oh, I can't be a boat captain because I have a felony conviction. Like all of a sudden the job licensing kind of deal, the limited record clearing becomes a very real issue. And one of the things I'm curious about from both of you guys is that you're right. We're all in the movement. When I think of Jeff, your conversations, right, I think about how like authentic of a conversation you can have business leader to business leader, right? In which businesses have the ability to take action themselves. And I grew up, surrounded by entrepreneurs, man. I love entrepreneurs and people move fast, right? It's like, oh, market's shifting or there's opportunity for me to make some money, man. I'm going to move fast. And so you could see real change happen, right? Like, oh, we're gonna go try and hire people. Let's see what we can do. And then the other side of it is also what you had mentioned, John, which is trying to work to change the policies that shape the marketplace, right? Like this, what do we do with driver's licenses? How do we clear people's records so that, you can actually have a conversation with the potential employee rather than getting kicked out by your HR algorithm or what have you. So I'm curious what you guys think about how those two things play together.
I think we're working the same problem from on different ends, right? I've met no one who knows more about policy than John. So he's been, besides being a friend, he's been an inspiration, and he also has been just an incredible resource to me. And, he's shamelessly quoted in the book. I would have quoted him more, but then I'd have to make him a co-author or something like that. And, but
super untapped talent,
is,
John
right, right. So I will never know 10% of what John knows about policy, but I do know that if we get the business community to look at people who are justice impacted as their future or current workforce, we'll get much better policies, right? We've got to put money behind in the power of capitalism. A lot of people in the justice community blame capitalism. I do not. We've not got to even this out and get people who want to grow the economy, want to grow their businesses, to become advocates for better policy. And the way they do that is by understanding the way that our justice policies today and our systems are holding back the business owner's personal prosperity because they're messing with the workforce. And so that's the angle I take. And then, there's a social angle. If you are working, if you're an employee and you find out that the person you've been working alongside by side for years and who you value as a friend, and you find out they have a record, you think differently about everyone with records. And, that's part of the integration that has to happen if we're also going to get better policies.
And to pick up on that, I think it's the responsibility of those of us working in policy, those of us who interface with businesses, those of us who interface with direct service community-based organizations. We need to know on the policy and community-based organization side first that if we don't deliver job-ready candidates to the business community, we cannot expect them to hire people for charity. Right? That's not the way it works. So if governors and legislatures can make policy adjustments and departments of corrections will make policy adjustments, et cetera, right, that increase job readiness, we then can deliver the candidates to these businesses, right? And that way, when Jeff is having his conversations, or if some legal officer calls me about it, I can give them comfort, and Jeff can give the business leaders comfort that they're going to get job-ready candidates. That's the responsibility of I think everybody in America, right? For all of these, and if we don't want to see additional crime, if we don't want to see tax burdens, if we don't want to see those things, we need to create job-ready people. Neil. That's why when I was very excited when I read from Washington, D.C. that you and Desmond, were getting into the second chance hiring space, in a very intentional fashion after the fantastic work you've done on voting rights and fees and so many other things. And when I saw that you guys were lending your powerful voice and platform in Florida to it, it motivated me. And as you know, I'm doing a second chance retention and hiring project in Florida. But when you think about how trajectory is built, when I looked at the landscape of Florida, I'm like, Florida's a tough place to do second chance hiring, right? It's just a tough place overall. What's the old saying, right? Come on vacation, leave on probation, right?
That's right.
So,
yeah.
right. So Florida is not exactly friendly on a lot of these issues, but there was so much good work going on down there, and the tide is changing, whether it's because of necessity, whether it's because of enlightenment, whatever the reason is, it's changing. And I feel that the more we can do, so say the Desmonds and Neils and Johns can do of the world and our networks to change those policies for the better Jeff is going, and the Jeffs of the world are going to be when they're sitting smoking a cigar with a CEO of a company saying, hey, I have a great line of untapped talent for you. You know, he's got to throw the book title in there.
But it's interesting, and then underline it
Bless
all.
you, John.
Because what you said, Jeff, is so true. I was just talking to a local mayor in Florida here about expanding second chance employment in that community. And the mayor, you know, the city manager was there, who's technically, you know, the employer. They kept talking about the person who worked for the city, who, you know, was a returning citizen who had been working for the city for 12 years. They all knew him. And to your point, that one story changed the entire trajectory of our conversation, because suddenly they were talking about a real person who was adding value to the company, so to speak, and they were becoming advocates in the process. And I think that I'm curious what you guys think about this, but one thing that really fuels us is that we know deep down, like, this work actually benefits the entire community, right? So a business can benefit, you know, an individual and a family can benefit. And at the same time, when we really dig into the numbers, and you know that if somebody can get access to employment, they're way less likely to, you know, reoffend, and therefore we're actually making the community safer in the process. It's hard to kind of poke holes at that, but I do find that sometimes it's a challenge to get people to focus on the issue, right? Because we live in a noisy world with so many other issues going on. Like, how do you foresee, like, and I love that you brought up Florida, John. I'm curious, because you guys have done work in other states. Like, how do you get to that tipping point? Like, do you know what I'm saying? Like, how do you know when you're going to start to see these driver's license reforms, these kind of fines and fees reforms, these, you know, record clearing reforms, all these things that help businesses hire people? Like, what's the secret sauce, y'all? We're just trying to get there faster down here.
You know, I guess I would say, if you look at some of the recent successes, enlisting the business community has been really important. So Utah has a clean slate, Michigan has a clean slate law. All of those things were passed not against the business community's wishes, but a lot of business leaders were very much part of that. And you know, there's a lot of answers to your question, Neil, and John will have, you know, a different perspective. But from my perspective, you need some leadership in the business community to stand up. They often have the ear of the governor, and they have the ability to change the narrative. To have business leaders saying, we need to do this for the sake of our prosperity and for safer communities, that's a very powerful message. It's not that, you know, I know anything different from people in the reform community, but it's the fact that I am coming from a lifelong business career that shakes people up to listen. So you need people from the business community to be very, very vocal on these points.
Yeah, and you know, and I think, you know, I'm really optimistic about Florida, candidly. I mean, obviously the great work you guys are doing, you know, you and Desmond, and obviously Sheena Meade, you know, headquartered with the Clean Slate initiative down there, which is completely transformative in this space. I was just sitting down with Secretary Dixon, the Florida Department of Corrections. There's so many interesting things he's doing to make the Department of Corrections more of a job readiness engine for any companies listening. If they want to put a manufacturing facility or a plant behind the wall, we can sit down with Secretary Dixon. They can sit down with Secretary Dixon and pitch that idea to him, so long as he has space and it meets certain custodial requirements. Businesses could be doing the exact training they need behind the wall, right? And training people long before they come out. This is the one place where Florida's truth in sentencing law actually works to somebody's advantage, because you can know with absolute certainty how long someone would be in a particular program. And what it boils down to, I think, as well in Florida is the economy's booming. Florida, the economy is booming. It's not like some other states in this country, right? So, I mean, there's record number of people moving in. There's record economic growth going on in Florida, which means you're going to need a record number of people to fill those jobs. And I think that as you look at all those factors sort of coalescing, and you realize that these people with records, us, could be part of that prosperity, it totally changes the game. And all we need are a couple of good things. And, it's funny. This is a project I'm working on called Retaining Talent, because I asked Jeff if I could use the word untapped talent, and he wanted to cut my throat. So he was saying, unless you put my name in bigger letters than the word untapped talent, you can't use it. So, and Jeff is actually going to be, featured in this corporate training documentary thing we're doing. And I think the really exciting part is that I've gotten around, I've talked to a lot of companies in business do second chance hiring. And even today, a lot of them are worried about being on camera, particularly, where it's going to be widely seen, because the entire community hasn't shifted that way. But when you dig deep, there's some fantastic work going on in Florida. For example, out in Pinellas County, a guy named Mike Gelazzo, if you know Mike.
Yep.
Right, Mike. I mean, he knows everybody in the area, right? He has this whole training program that feeds right into businesses. You guys obviously have been doing outstanding work. The Florida Foundation for Correctional Excellence was formed as a part of, it's formed as a result of the great work going on at the governmental level. And that doesn't even count people like Kathy Fernandez-Rundle, who I just spent some time with last Monday down in Miami. Right? Miami-Dade, who, is the architect of the drug courts in this country.
That's right.
And so Florida, there's a lot of exciting stuff going on in Florida, and I think that the state is finally hitting its moment. And I do think it's driven in many ways, this criminal justice reform boom I think we see in Florida right now. It's being catalyzed, maybe not driven, by the booming economy.
No, I'm with you. We've probably talked to over 30 local chambers of commerce. Somehow we spent 10 years, organizing people, getting folks, behind a ballot initiative and working on empowerment issues. And then suddenly it's like, let's do job fairs all over the state because employers are looking to hire people. So,
Yeah.
so I'm feeling that as well. And it really, I hope it gives hope to folks who are watching and listening that this might be the moment that the stars are aligned here in Florida, that we can make that next step forward, but ultimately we have to do it together. And so I'm hearing Jeff talk like that. I hear you loud and clear, like the business community, having some voices within the business community who can really shift that narrative and talk the business case for these kind of changes.
And it's really important at this point of time. If we are going to capitalize on this and see real change, the business community has to have a positive experience. And that means
100%.
If someone who's on parole can't go out of state to a job and their employer asks them to, they got to make it known, right? Because I know of instances where employers tried this. Someone went out of state, were violated, and stopped showing up to work. And, because they were reincarcerated. And so a lot of well-meaning employers will try this, and then they'll find things they didn't know about, because it's incumbent upon either intermediaries like workforce development organizations or the candidate to be upfront about, you have to know, I need time to meet a parole officer. I'll make up the time for you. You have to know, here are the conditions of my parole. And they have to, and I know it's very difficult, people who have not had histories sometimes of mentoring and coaching and have a distrust to reach out and put themselves out there and say, here's the things I'm going to need. Can you help me? Or find those resources from nonprofits that can do that, because otherwise it doesn't work, right? I have too many employers today who are approaching this and say, yeah, I guess we're going to lower our standards and hire people with records. And I'm very consistent. That's the wrong approach. This is seeking out talent from non-traditional sources. And what the employers who do it right find, they get exceptional levels of talent, because of people who've had to navigate reentry navigating issues at work is nothing if you've gone through all the navigation of life from reentry. So you get the adjective that employers use, second chance employers use all the time, speaking about employees from this population. They've got grit, right? Determination, persistence. Those are really admirable traits for an employee. But you have to have an employer that's going to look for that and not view this as lowering standards. If you don't go looking for talent, you won't find it. So we have to be very careful in taking advantage of this moment, that we are directing it in a way that will be sustainable and not just a patch.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, Neil, I agree 100% with everything Jeff said. And just to bring it back to Florida for a second, I'm betting big on Florida on this one. I wouldn't be flying from D.C. back and forth, to sweat to death and nearly get heat stroke trying to film down there if I didn't think that there was action going on in Florida.
I hear that. And we feel it too. And we just want to make sure to take advantage of the moment. It reminds me of when I first met Desmond. I was actually working at a program that helped people who had been incarcerated get job training in culinary, hospitality, the local jobs in Southwest Florida. And one of the things you said, Jeff, was really empowering to me, was this idea of having proper expectations. That's kind of like, if you've been through the reentry process, you can go through the assimilation process to get a job, but there does need to be communication, because for me, it's always, hey man, we're just like anybody else. Like the retention rates, the promotion rates, you can see the data that shows it's very similar, but that doesn't mean that everybody's the perfect fit for every job. And we got to be careful about setting expectations in a way that says, oh gosh, not every employee works out, right? And so how do we get past that? Because what we're talking about is more systemic change, right? In terms of setting businesses up for success and setting communities up for success.
Yeah, if you set the business up for success, in many ways, I don't want to be too glib about this, but in many ways, the rest of the problems will take care of itself, or at least you'll have a much friendlier backdrop. So it's really critical that businesses, the process that we recommend to businesses is not just hire someone. It's know what you're getting into, know that they may need flex time to meet with a PO, know that there may be restrictions, know that this may be someone who struggles with housing. The business doesn't have to solve all these issues, but they have to help people who aren't used to, who may not know how to navigate to resources. They have to help them navigate. It's just another investment. Businesses invest in talent all the time. I always give the example of McDonald's Corporation, which moved from the suburbs of Chicago, about an hour outside, or in rush hour, 3 hours outside, an hour outside of Chicago, into the city, because they were chasing where they would find sort of young talent. It cost them $200 million to make that move, to build their new headquarters. They did it to chase talent. These are investments, and they're investments you can even measure in terms of lower turnover costs. There's a group of companies in Western Michigan that have set up essentially a nonprofit to help their employees. They are assessed the cost. They can measure that cost versus their savings from lower turnover. It turns out it's a better than 200% return on their investment. It's an investment, not a cost. And businesses have to understand, though, it's worth making that investment.
When I hear you say that, is like, it's an investment, not a cost, that cuts both ways, right? Because I do think that there are some folks who want to make the argument that it's like, oh, hey, the business needs to, this is a social issue and we need to solve it through the business, right? And that creates a dynamic that we're not aligned appropriately, right? We're not actually doing the things that we do best, and moving change forward. And so we need to be careful about how we, show up in these spaces. It was described to me like that, oh, this is like hiring seniors. This is like hiring new graduates out of college. This is an untapped population, an untapped talent that Ba-ding. Is, you guys are teaching me. I like it.
Sorry.
I like your hustle, man. Right, like if those things get aligned, then you can really start to see us flourish, in a new environment that makes it easier to hire people.
And this is a challenge for nonprofits, social service. Look, working in a social service nonprofit is really hard work. You are patching problem after problem after problem, and you tend to triage. Let's deal with the biggest problem today. That's not the model that works when you're working with employers. You can't send over the person in greatest need. You have to send over the person who's most job ready. And my friend Dan Meyer, who's the founder of Nehemiah Industries, one of the most notable second chance employers in the country, Harvard Business School, teaches them to all their MBA candidates. 150 of his 220 workers are second chance. He says, he puts it, he said, nonprofits have their clients, but they also have their customers, the business community, if they're doing it right. And so we have to appreciate for the nonprofits, this is bringing in a new stakeholder that they may not have become accustomed to working or not been accustomed to working with in the past.
Oh man, I hope folks are listening, right? Because I mean, you guys are getting me all excited here from my own home state, and so John, it looks like I'm looking at the time here, and we are actually almost there. Could you help us kind of put the exclamation point on what's possible? Like you have navigated, you've seen some of these changes get implemented, negligent hiring, clean slate and record clearing to, occupational licensing reform. What are the kind of things that can have the biggest impact for the business community, i.e. our communities and people who would be employed there as you look ahead to the next upcoming months and years and what's possible?
Sure. So picking up on what Jeff said about businesses, being sort of educated on criminal justice status, right? What it means for a person to be on probation, parole. I think that one of the things I've spent a lot of time doing are bridging those gaps between the business community and the supervising agencies, right? So, going around the country, I have a good relationship or access to so many chief probation officers, chief parole officers, etc., parole board chairs, right? And the idea is, there's this worry from people that, well, my PO is not going to be participating in my employment journey. In most cases, almost all cases, nothing could be farther from the truth. So bringing those supervision agencies together with the business community to demystify that process, I think is a really important, what I'll call administrative policy change. You don't need a law for it. You just need to create a forum for it. I think in Florida, I hope to see expanded record clearing come your way. I know you just did some great stuff with juveniles just the other day, and that's a real credit to you guys down there. But I do think you need more expanded record clearing to give the community pause. Give the community comfort so they don't pause when hiring folks. And I hope to see in Florida one day parole supervision be brought back. So the studies have all shown across the country that a person who maxes out of prison is much more likely to go back to prison and recidivate than a person who was put on parole first. In fact, they studied New Jersey because everybody was angry at the parole board for hitting everybody and not letting anybody out in like 2011, 12, and 13 or whatever they did the study, that they ended up figuring those statistics out. Pew did the research. So I'd love to see parole paired with job readiness. I think you have a really unique moment. I think you have a really great Secretary of Corrections down there in Ricky Dixon. He has, unlimited credibility. He worked units. He was a warden, right? He's a cop's cop. But he understands this stuff and is really interested in fashioning a public safety solution towards employment. So I think in Florida, those are going to be the areas to gain ground.
Oh man, you got my hair on my arms standing up just thinking about that. That is so awesome. Well, guys, we're there. Like this time just flew by. I just really want to thank you guys both for joining us on the podcast and having a meaningful conversation. There's nuggets of what both of you guys said that I'm very much going to be, sending over to kind of policymakers and opinion leaders and friends so that we can all kind of get on the same page, especially as it relates to, down here in Florida. I appreciate all the nice comments that you guys said and the hope that we have here in terms of implementing real change. So I just want to thank you both for taking time out of it. You're both overdressed, right? Or I'm underdressed. It might be a New Jersey thing. I don't know. But from the bottom of my heart, man, I just really want to thank you guys so much for taking the time and talking this out with us today.
Well, thank you, Neil. And obviously let us know if we can help. Jeff lives down there and I'm just a plane ride away, and I've been doing a lot of work down there. So get us involved any way that you think we can add value, and let's get some people on some job sites, and let's change the world.
I love it. I'm taking you up on
that. John can even stay at my house.
Even better.
Anyway, Neil, thank you so much. I'm sorry to miss Desmond on this call, but thank you for the work that you're doing. as a citizen and resident of Florida, the dignity you are bringing, giving people, restoring them to full citizenship is something that is important to me as a resident of this state. And so I appreciate your hard work very much.
Thank you so much, man. That means a lot. Thank you. So, well, we will see you guys later. Thanks so much.
You know that we are the voices.